Stick it in the fridge, stick it in the fridge, stick it in the fridge, stick it in the fridge. Yo, when I'm fishing, let's keep one thing clear. The bait's over there, the brew's right here. I like cool beverage, yeah. I like cool beverage, yeah. I like cool beverage, yeah.
Now the next step is to set up our brewing schedule, or our mash and lauter steps. So in the main beer tools window, we go over to the right hand side where there's a display drop down, and we were just building the recipe in the ingredients display, and there are a few additional ones here to take note of. One is equipment. This is where you set up all of the different vessels and burners or heat sources you have, and the more of that you fill in, especially if you calibrate your vessels, especially your mash tun, as to how much heat it loses over time and things like that, the more you do, the better the results of the software are going to be. You don't necessarily have to do it to get a good schedule, but you'll find that you hit your mash temperatures a lot more accurately if you set this stuff up. I'm going to go into that drop down, that display drop down again, and select schedule, and that is basically the order of operations that you're going to follow on your brew day. And right now it's blank because we haven't told it what style of brewing we do. So the first thing we're going to do, just to be clear, we're doing a batch sparge, and we're going to do a single infusion mash. In other words, we're going to just add strike water to our grain, stir it, and let it sit at a certain temperature for 60 minutes. So let's do a new mash in. We'll just call that step mash in. And you can add some notes if you want to, if you do something special with this batch, but let's just say that we're going to leave it blank. The various vessels that you use can be specified here. Again, you'll see that anything that you entered in your equipment list will show up here. I'm just going to leave everything as none because I'm going to assume that you didn't set that up yet. Let's say that our target mash temperature is 154 degrees. Our grist is room temperature because it's been sitting in an environmentally, 70-degree room. The infusion rate's set to 1.25 quarts per pound, which is typical mash thickness. And notice it tells us what the liquor volume is going to be based on that entry. It says 2.66 gallons. I don't like those strange increments, so I either round down or up to the nearest quart. So let's just say 2.75 and hit enter. And you'll see that the infusion rate was adjusted to 1.29 quarts per pound. It's close enough, and I like the round numbers. So in order to hit that target temperature of 154, it's telling us the strike temp is 166.5. And again, that assumes, because we didn't select any specific mash vessel, it assumes that the mash tun's preheated plenty and it's not going to pull any heat out. If you haven't done calibration or anything like that, you're going to have to go a few degrees hotter on this, and I'm thinking something like 8 degrees hotter. Alright, but let's hit OK, and you can see it added the line to this schedule. Alright, the next thing in all grain brewing is a rest, so that you can convert your starches. So you can put select new rest, and again, that was a right click on the screen. Call this our sack rest. And the typical time is 60 minutes. Now the final temperature, if you calibrated your mash tun properly, it would automatically set this. But just from experience, let's say that you know that your mash tun loses 2 degrees in 60 minutes, so I'm going to put 152 in there. Okay, the next thing you need to do is, after the rest, you can select your new batch sparge. And this is probably the most confusing piece of the whole thing, because people do batch sparging in slightly different ways. Let's just call this the batch sparge. And the first thing we do is the first runnings. All right, I don't add any mash out water to the mash tun at the end of the sack rest, and that's why I'm leaving this volume at 0. This volume here is how much sparge water you would infuse in this step. And again, because I'm taking first runnings, you leave the volume at 0. The temperature here is what you enter as your infusion temperature. And again, because I'm putting 0 in, it doesn't matter what this says. It says 168, that's fine. The next thing I'm going to do is expand this by hitting the plus sign. I'm going to hit it twice because that'll add my 2 distinct sparges. Now, before I go and adjust my sparge infusion temperatures and volumes, I just wanted to point out that this button down here, or this checkbox, is the lock to kettle volume checkbox, and our goal is to run off enough work to reach the kettle volume that the software tells us that we need based on all the other criteria that we entered. So we need 7.5 in the kettle at boiling when we first start boiling. So if we select lock here, you notice it changed the total runoff to 7.36 gallons. And the reason it's telling us that is because once this 162 degree runoff reaches boiling temperature, it will have expanded to 7.5. Okay, so again, what it tries to do is adjust all of these infusions to be equal. So based on that, it wanted all 3 of these sparges to be 1.79 gallon infusions. Again, I want to make sure that I force the first runnings to be 0 because I'm not going to add anything to the mash before I take my first runnings. I'll leave that at 0. So what it does is then it adjusts the following 2 sparges to equal volume so that it does end up with this total runoff. Alright, so let's just quickly review. That's enough of this, enough steps to get you brewing, and let's just review what the display is going to tell us here. Alright, the first line is our mash in, and again, 2.75 gallons is a 1.29 quart per pound thickness. The infusion or strike temp is 166.5. It should settle at about 154 if you had preheated your mash tun. And it's saying that we have 1.85 gallons available runoff, and there's 3.5 gallons in the vessel at that point. The next line is simply the sack rest, and that's just telling you to wait 60 minutes. The next thing is your first runnings. Again, remember, I'm not infusing anything, so it says 0 gallons for the infusion. Again, 168, doesn't matter what that says, I'm not infusing anything, so that's really nothing. And then right here in the collected column, it's saying I got 1.85 gallons out. And again, that's based on the grain's ability to absorb water. And the second sparge is on this blue line here. 2.75 gallons at 180 degrees brings our mash temp up to 166 degrees, which I like to hit something over 165 just to make sure the sugars are as soluble as possible. And again, after I drain that off, I add a second sparge, 2.63 gallons at 180 again, and that gets me up to 170. Yeah, it's pretty much borderline. You could drop this down to, let's say, 177 for both of these, and there you don't break your 170 degree threshold that everybody's scared of. All right, I hope these 2 videos were helpful for you. Again, try Beer Tools Pro. It's a free download. You get to use it for a little while and give it a chance. I'd say use it on 2 batches, and if you still don't like it, then I guess it was never meant to be. All right, take care.
I like cold every day,